Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world that smells faintly of musket smoke and wet wool. You're standing on a frozen battlefield somewhere in the heart of Europe, where the banner of Prussia droops under a gray winter sky. Around you, the remnants of an army stumble home, boots soaked, uniforms tattered, their pride left behind in the mud of Jena and Auerstedt. Napoleon's cannons still echo in the valleys, and for a brief moment, Prussia, once proud and disciplined, looks like it's about to vanish from history. You probably won't survive this one if you stick around too long in 1806. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I'm curious who's out there listening to Prussia's Ghost tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the shattered kingdom of Prussia after the twin defeats at Jena and Auerstedt. The French Emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte, has done what no one thought possible. He's demolished the old Prussian war machine, that proud descendant of Frederick the Great. In barely a single day, the myth of invincibility evaporated like morning mist. Soldiers who once strutted across Europe now stumble home barefoot, some trading their muskets for bread, others simply vanishing into the countryside. In Berlin, panic turns to humiliation. The French march into the capital without resistance, their drums echoing through the Unter den Linden Boulevard. The royal family flees east to the fortress of Königsberg, clutching what little dignity remains. The Prussian state, rigid, hierarchical, built on the brittle bones of old nobles and ancient privilege, lies broken. Its bureaucracy bloated, its officers out of touch, its army built more for parade than for war. And yet, something stirs beneath the wreckage. You can almost feel it, the faint heartbeat of determination. Because here's the thing about being humiliated. It can destroy you, or it can transform you. And Prussia, humiliated by Napoleon, chooses the latter. The people themselves feel the shock. Merchants, teachers, clerks suddenly realize the state they'd trusted is fallible. Pamphlets circulate in secret, urging reform, patriotism, unity. The names that will soon reshape Prussia's destiny: Gerhard von Scharnhorst, August von Gneisenau, and Karl von Stein, begin whispering plans in dimly lit rooms. They know the old order must die, so that a new Prussia can live. The French occupation brings more than humiliation. It brings ideas. The Enlightenment's whispers of equality and merit creep in through the cracks in the walls. Ironically, Napoleon's victory becomes the midwife of Prussia's rebirth. The old aristocratic army, where birth determined command, begins to look dangerously obsolete. Ordinary men, farmers' sons and townsmen alike, had fought bravely, but were led by officers more concerned with etiquette than tactics. One quirky little tidbit: after the defeat, Napoleon personally ordered the Prussian guards to surrender their banners and eagles, and he paraded them mockingly through Paris, a gesture that cut deeper than any battlefield loss. Historians still argue whether that public humiliation, more than the destruction itself, was what truly ignited Prussia's reformist fire. Back in Königsberg, King Frederick William III feels paralyzed. He's not exactly a visionary. Contemplative, shy, and burdened by indecision, he'd rather discuss hunting than war. But his wife, Queen Louise, becomes the rallying spirit of a defeated nation. Her grace and defiance in front of Napoleon himself, when she begged for leniency after Jena, turns her into a living symbol of Prussian pride. Later generations will practically canonize her as the soul of the nation. You might call her the first influencer of modern German nationalism, minus the ring light. Meanwhile, the once feared Prussian army becomes a ghost force. Its numbers are slashed to a mere 42,000 men by French decree. But what looks like a punishment will soon become an incubator for innovation. Within this small army, the seeds of the modern military state are planted. Officers begin experimenting with new ideas: merit-based promotion, staff coordination, decentralized command. The blueprint for the 19th century military revolution quietly takes shape under French supervision. Imagine the scene. A candlelit barracks room somewhere in East Prussia. Smoke curling up from cheap tobacco. Young officers crowd around a map, debating the last battle. One of them insists that discipline alone isn't enough. Another suggests that soldiers must think, not just obey. They argue about the French use of corps, mobility, and morale. They vow to learn from their enemy, even imitate him if needed. And in that moment, the future of European warfare is quietly being rewritten. Meanwhile, life under French occupation is a constant reminder of weakness. Taxes flow to Paris. French officials dictate terms. Even language becomes a symbol of humiliation. Street signs repainted, French officers swaggering through Berlin cafes. A bitter joke circulates. We may as well learn French. It's the new language of command. Yet, beneath the cynicism, there's a simmering pride. Everywhere you look, reform-minded thinkers are asking the same question. What went wrong? Some blame the outdated tactics of line infantry. Others, the corruption of the officer corps. Still others, the rigid social system that stifled innovation. And perhaps all are right. By 1808, the process of resurrection has begun. Scharnhorst, appointed head of the Military Reorganization Commission, begins rebuilding from scratch. He pushes for universal service. Though Napoleon forbids large armies, he finds loopholes. Soldiers serve short terms, are released, and replaced, creating a reserve of trained men far beyond the official limit. It's like discovering a cheat code for survival. And while the army reforms, so does society. Baron von Stein enacts sweeping bureaucratic changes, freeing serfs, modernizing taxation, empowering local governments. Suddenly, being Prussian begins to mean something more than obedience. It becomes a shared national project. The same peasants who once bowed to noble landlords now find themselves citizens of a nation under reconstruction. The atmosphere in these years is electric, a mix of despair and determination. You can picture towns rebuilding, schools reopening, and workshops clanging late into the night. A new kind of patriotism begins to form, quiet, efficient, methodical. Less about cheering and flags, more about doing your duty well, every single day. The irony is hard to miss. Napoleon's domination forces Prussia to modernize, turning the very lessons of its conqueror into the foundations of its revenge. The same emphasis on mobility, merit, and initiative that fueled French victories will one day fuel Prussia's triumphs. And somewhere out there, perhaps in a quiet village near the Vistula, a boy is growing up who will inherit this new world. He doesn't know it yet, but his name will be Helmuth von Moltke, and he'll turn these ideas into reality on battlefields where trains deliver armies and telegrams carry orders faster than cavalry ever could. For now, though, the winter of defeat stretches on. You walk past frozen rivers and burned farmhouses, through towns where French garrisons drink Prussian beer and locals mutter into their scarves. The future feels far away, but beneath the silence, something powerful stirs. A state learning, painfully, how to be reborn through discipline and reform. Humiliation is no longer just an emotion, it's a lesson plan. And Prussia, the world's most stubborn student, is about to ace it. You wake to the clatter of boots and the scratch of quills. The sound of Prussia rebuilding itself from the ground up. The year is 1807, and in the smoky rooms of Königsberg in Berlin, a group of determined men decide that defeat is not destiny. Their names may not sound glamorous: Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, Boyen. But together, they form the mind of the new Prussia. Gerhard von Scharnhorst, a Hanoverian by birth, has seen the French war machine up close and knows exactly why it works. An army, he once said, is only as intelligent as the state that commands it. To him, the problem isn't just tactics or technology, it's spirit. The Prussian army had become too stiff, too ceremonial, too aristocratic. It moved like a wind-up toy, predictable and proud, while Napoleon's forces danced circles around it. And so Scharnhorst begins to dismantle the old order. He abolishes corporal punishment. Imagine that, in a system built on fear. He encourages debate among officers and introduces exams for promotion. Instead of serving because of your noble birth, you now need to prove you can think. One by one, the ancient hierarchies crumble, replaced by something astonishingly modern. The idea that a soldier should also be a citizen. His close ally, August von Gneisenau, shares the same dream, but adds a layer of emotional fire. Where Scharnhorst is analytical, Gneisenau is poetic, convinced that the army must be the mirror of the nation's soul. A people that fights for itself, he insists, cannot be conquered. He believes war is not the domain of princes, but of nations. And in that idea lies the seed of total mobilization that will define the 19th century. Together, they convince King Frederick William III, reluctantly, to let them reshape everything. Recruitment, training, logistics, even the relationship between soldier and state. But reform doesn't come easily. The old guard fights back. Generals sneer at the upstarts who quote Rousseau and Montesquieu instead of Frederick the Great. Some officers resign rather than share mess halls with commoners. You can almost hear them muttering over brandy glasses. Next, they'll be giving farmhands command of regiments. Well, spoiler alert, that's exactly what's going to happen. Still, progress crawls forward. The Military Reorganization Commission becomes the beating heart of renewal. Scharnhorst sketches out what he calls the People's Army, not a rabble, but a disciplined force drawn from every class. Gneisenau reorganizes fortifications, modernizes artillery, and champions officer education. They study Napoleon obsessively, like students dissecting a master's thesis, determined to understand the enemy who humiliated them. One mainstream historical fact worth noting: it's during these years that the Kriegsschule, or war school, in Berlin evolves into a serious military academy. It trains officers not just in tactics, but in geography, history, mathematics, and philosophy. Imagine a military curriculum that includes Kant alongside cannon drills. That fusion of intellect and discipline becomes the hallmark of Prussian command culture. And here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Scharnhorst supposedly encouraged cadets to read novels. Yes, novels, to better understand human motivation. It sounds absurd, but in a sense, it made them better at predicting morale, leadership behavior, even enemy psychology. Somewhere between geometry and Goethe, the Prussian officer learned empathy, a rare commodity on 19th century battlefields. But not everyone agrees on how to modernize. Some reformers argue for gradual change, others demand revolution. Historians still argue whether these early reforms were genuinely democratic or simply pragmatic, a way to make a more efficient war machine under the illusion of equality. By 1810, the reforms begin to seep beyond the army. Civil administrators, inspired by the military example, streamline bureaucracy. Schools adopt stricter curricula, emphasizing duty and punctuality. Even music and architecture take on a certain orderliness, all angles and precision. You could say Prussia starts to think like an army long before it fights like one again. In this tense period, a figure emerges to tie it all together: Baron Karl von Stein, the civil reformer. He believes that moral strength, not just muskets, will save the nation. Under his direction, serfdom is abolished in 1807. The peasantry, once bound to the land, now owns property, pays taxes, and sends sons to school. It's not purely altruism, of course. A freer population is also a more recruitable one, but for the time, it's revolutionary. Meanwhile, the cautious king balances on a political tightrope. Napoleon watches closely, demanding that Prussia remain weak and loyal. French ambassadors report every whisper of reform. The royal court pretends compliance by day, but by night, officers train in secret, memorizing new drill manuals smuggled under false covers. It's like living in an occupied spy thriller, except the stakes are national survival. One evening, Scharnhorst drafts a secret memorandum that would become the soul of modern Prussian doctrine. War is not an isolated act. He argues that every element of state, education, industry, morale, must serve it. That insight will later echo in Clausewitz's On War and shape how entire nations fight. Speaking of Clausewitz, yes, the same man whose book later gathers dust on military academies worldwide, he's a young officer during these reforms. He studies under Scharnhorst, absorbing every idea like a sponge. His experiences in this crucible of defeat and renewal will later make him one of history's most quoted theorists. Ironically, if Prussia hadn't been crushed, Clausewitz might have remained an anonymous staff officer scribbling polite reports. Defeat can be quite the motivator. By 1812, Prussia is cornered into an awkward alliance with Napoleon. The French emperor demands troops for his invasion of Russia. Prussia complies, sending 20,000 men eastward under General York. But loyalties waver. When the Grande Armée collapses in the snow, York breaks away, signing a convention with the Russians at Tauroggen. It's technically treason, but it reignites Prussian pride. The deed signals that the time of submission is ending. In Berlin, people whisper that the spirit of Frederick has returned. In secret societies and patriotic clubs, citizens prepare for liberation. Young men train with wooden muskets. Poets write verses about freedom. And when the War of Liberation begins in 1813, it feels less like a campaign and more like a moral crusade. When the call to arms rings out, "An mein Volk," even the cautious king finally finds his voice. The army swells far beyond what Napoleon's treaties allow. Farmers, students, craftsmen, all flock to enlist. It's the birth of the Landwehr, a people's militia integrated into the regular army. For the first time, war feels like a shared civic duty, not the pastime of nobles. As you imagine this, you can almost hear the sound of forges roaring, tailors sewing uniforms, and mothers whispering quiet prayers. The whole society hums with purpose. It's not chaos, it's choreography. Prussia has learned to synchronize its heartbeats. Of course, idealism comes with irony. The new army fights alongside Russia, Britain, and Austria to crush Napoleon, the same powers that once looked down on it. But at Leipzig in 1813, the Battle of Nations, Prussian troops prove themselves again, their discipline tempered by reform. When the smoke clears, Napoleon retreats, and Prussia's redemption is complete. Still, victory brings a new question. What next? Should the reforms continue, spreading equality and participation, or should the monarchy reclaim control now that the crisis has passed? Historians still argue about that crossroads. Some see it as the moment when Prussia could have become a liberal nation. Instead, it doubles down on order and militarism, but you can't deny the momentum. Out of ruin and reform emerges a machine unlike any Europe has seen. A state that thinks strategically, acts collectively, and remembers humiliation like scripture. Every bureaucrat, every teacher, every drummer boy carries a fragment of that memory. You lean back and picture the map of Europe in 1815. The Congress of Vienna redrawing borders. Prussia is back, not the largest power, not yet the mightiest, but certainly the most disciplined. It holds pieces of Poland, Westphalia, and the Rhineland now, with coal mines and factories that will soon feed its iron dreams. From this point forward, everything, education, infrastructure, culture, will move in lockstep toward one goal: never again to be humiliated. And that, my sleepy friend, is how revolutions begin, not with muskets, but with resolve. You find yourself standing in a courtyard lined with uniformed boys, their breath fogging in the crisp morning air. No muskets today, only books. Their teacher, a retired officer with chalk-dusted fingers, barks out questions about geography, mathematics, and moral philosophy. This is no ordinary school. It's the beating heart of Prussia's rebirth. Here, the art of war and the discipline of thought fuse together into something new: the educated soldier. By the 1810s, the reformers have realized something profound. If you want a smarter army, you need a smarter nation. And so begins one of the most ambitious projects in modern history: to make education not just a privilege, but a duty. The Prussian state takes over schooling, standardizes curriculum, and demands attendance. Even in remote villages, children recite lessons about duty, order, and the glory of serving the fatherland. It's not just reading and writing, it's indoctrination by design, but also empowerment. You sit at a wooden desk beside those pupils, their quills scratching rhythmically. On the wall hangs a portrait of the late Queen Louise, the saintly symbol of national virtue. The teacher speaks of the Volksgeist, the spirit of the people, reminding them that every lesson learned is another brick in the wall of Prussia's defense. The educational revolution is led by one man, Wilhelm von Humboldt, a scholar-statesman whose ideas still shape schooling today. He insists that true education isn't about memorization, it's about forming character and intellect. He establishes the University of Berlin in 1810, where students are taught to think critically, to blend science and philosophy. Imagine an age when a general could quote Goethe and a physicist might design artillery. This is Prussia's dream. And yes, there's your mainstream historical fact. By the mid-19th century, Prussia's literacy rate soars above that of France or Austria. Education becomes the country's secret weapon long before its rifles and railways. But here's a quirkier tidbit. School teachers in rural Prussia often doubled as militia drill masters. In some towns, lessons literally began with morning marches around the yard. Arithmetic problems involved counting cannonballs. History classes celebrated Frederick the Great's victories. It's as if the entire society rehearsed for future wars between spelling tests and recess. The result? A generation conditioned to think in ranks, reason in strategies, and obey in structure, but also to adapt and calculate. The reforms of Scharnhorst and Humboldt intertwine, birthing a strange hybrid, a nation of disciplined thinkers. Of course, historians still argue whether this system truly liberated minds or quietly shackled them. Was it enlightenment or programming? Perhaps both. Every virtue, after all, casts a shadow. The Prussian educational ethos soon feeds into its army. Officers attend advanced academies that resemble universities more than barracks. They study history not to memorize battles, but to analyze them. They learn to improvise when orders fail, to act on initiative, a radical idea in an age of blind obedience. You might call it intellectual militarism. As you walk through the hallways of the Kriegsakademie, War Academy, you can almost smell the ink and gunpowder mingling. Young cadets debate the campaigns of Napoleon, arguing whether genius or organization truly wins wars. A grizzled instructor interrupts. Both, but only if you can read the map and the man. That's the spirit the reformers want. A fusion of mind and will. The state soon realizes that education isn't only for officers. It's the glue binding the entire population. Schools teach punctuality, order, responsibility, all virtues that translate neatly into military readiness. The classroom becomes a miniature army. The army becomes a giant classroom. And this idea spreads like wildfire across Europe. Foreign observers visit Berlin and Königsberg, astonished by what they see. One British traveler in the 1830s writes that the Prussian child learns earlier to obey than to speak. He meant it as criticism, but the Prussians take it as praise. The system also births a new class of citizens, the bureaucrat soldier. Civil servants are trained in the same discipline as soldiers. Soldiers, in turn, learn administration, files, drills, and regulations, each executed with mathematical precision. You can almost hear the future clicking into place, like the gears of a factory that hasn't yet been built. Still, behind the efficiency lies a subtle tension. With so much emphasis on duty, where does individuality go? Some critics warn that Prussia risks breeding obedience at the expense of creativity. Yet even rebellion finds its place within this machine. Thinkers like Hegel, teaching at Berlin, reinterpret obedience as rational freedom. The idea that by serving the state, you fulfill your highest self. It's elegant philosophy and a convenient justification. Let's pause for a lighthearted image. A young student sneaks a novel by Goethe into class, hiding it under his Latin grammar book. When the teacher catches him, he scolds, "Literature is no use to a soldier." But years later, that same boy might become an officer who reads Faust by lantern light during campaign. Proof that curiosity always finds a loophole, even in uniform. By the 1830s, education becomes a kind of quiet arms race. While France perfects its diplomacy and Britain its industry, Prussia perfects its citizens. School inspections are so strict that even lateness is treated as moral failing. The phrase Ordnung muss sein, there must be order, becomes a national motto, half proverb, half warning. And it works. Within a generation, Prussia transforms from provincial backwater to intellectual powerhouse. Its scientists pioneer chemistry and engineering. Its officers revolutionize staff planning and logistics. The state has discovered a new kind of conquest, one that begins in the classroom and ends on the battlefield. But all of this, you realize, has a side effect. It merges identity with service. To be Prussian is to be prepared, to study, to train, to obey, to endure. The line between school and barracks blurs completely. You might joke that even their lullabies have marching rhythms. Yet amid this rising order, a quiet debate brews among philosophers and soldiers alike. Historians still argue whether Prussia's educational miracle created the foundation of modern democracy or merely perfected benevolent authoritarianism. After all, when every mind is trained to serve the collective, who dares to dissent? You glance again at those students from the opening of this section. Their faces calm, focused, almost serene. They don't look oppressed, they look purposeful. For them, duty isn't a burden, it's identity. The reforms ripple outward. The same principles that shaped the classroom soon shape the factory, the train schedule, even the dinner table. Punctuality becomes sacred, efficiency almost moral. There's a rhythm to Prussian life now, mechanical, precise, yet strangely comforting. This disciplined education system doesn't just produce soldiers. It produces thinkers like Alexander von Humboldt, naturalists like Liebig, engineers who will one day build railways and telegraphs that knit Europe together. In a sense, every technological leap that powers Prussia's future empire starts here, in the echo of chalk against slate. As you walk through a Prussian town in the 1840s, you can feel it in the air, the hum of competence. Schools, factories, and military depots all share the same architecture: plain, rectangular, functional. Beauty isn't the goal, usefulness is. And somehow, that austerity feels powerful. By now, even neighboring nations have noticed. France sends observers to copy the schooling system. Britain debates whether to follow. They fear that the next generation of Prussians will outthink and outfight them. And they're right. Still, beneath the success, one nagging truth remains. The machine runs smoothly because everyone accepts their role. But when machines run too smoothly, they can't change direction easily. The habits formed in these decades, discipline, hierarchy, conformity, will one day prove both blessing and curse. For the moment, though, you stand in that crisp courtyard again as the bell rings. The students snap to attention. Lessons are over. Tomorrow, they'll do it all again. Same desks, same drills, same songs about honor and the fatherland. They don't yet know it, but they're rehearsing for the century ahead, where knowledge and war will march in perfect step. You exhale slowly. The sound of the bell fades. Somewhere far away, steam engines are being tested, telegraphs are being strung, and a new age of mobility is about to dawn. The classroom has done its job. Now the world outside will bear the results. Prussia has discovered its greatest weapon, and it isn't the cannon or the bayonet. It's the educated mind, sharpened by duty and precision. You wake before dawn to the sound of drums and the murmur of boots on cobblestone. The mist curls low over a training field outside Berlin, where lines of men, farmers, clerks, and artisans stand shoulder to shoulder. Some wear patched trousers, others faded coats from older brothers. None of them look like soldiers, yet they will be, because this is the new Prussia, where every man must serve. Conscription, the universal duty of defense, isn't just policy here. It's philosophy. Born from the trauma of Napoleon's conquest and Scharnhorst's reforms, it reshapes the kingdom's very identity. No longer is war the sport of kings or the pride of nobles. It's the responsibility of everyone with a heartbeat. You watch as the sergeant barks orders and the line begins to move. Not perfectly, but earnestly. Some stumble on the turn, others swing their muskets too wide. It doesn't matter. They're not professionals, they're citizens. The point isn't polish, it's participation. In this field, class divisions blur, if only for a moment. The tailor drills beside the blacksmith, the farmer beside the schoolteacher. Each is both a man and a cog in a greater design. This wasn't always so. Before 1806, the Prussian army was a professional caste, insulated from society. Commoners feared it as much as they admired it. But under the new system, service becomes a rite of passage, like baptism or marriage. You don't just fight for the state, you become part of it. The reformers called it the Landwehr system, and by 1813 it proved its worth. Farmers who had never seen battle fought alongside veterans and helped drive Napoleon's troops from German soil. The experiment worked. When the state trusted its people fought like they owned it. That's your mainstream historical fact. The Landwehr, a reserve militia composed of citizens, became the backbone of the 1813 to 1815 campaigns. It wasn't the largest or best equipped force, but it embodied the unity that Prussia had been missing. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some villages, the local Landwehr officers were chosen by popular vote. Imagine democratic elections for a military role in early 19th century Europe. It didn't last long. The monarchy wasn't thrilled. But for a brief, strange moment, Prussia flirted with grassroots militarism. You walk along the rows of tents and smell soup simmering in iron pots. The talk around the fire isn't of glory, but of wages, families, and neighbors. The soldiers laugh about officers who once strutted through town like peacocks. Now those same officers share their rations. Hierarchy bends, but doesn't break. There's still a chain of command. This is Prussia, after all, but it feels less distant now. The success of universal service has an unintended consequence. It weaves the army into daily life. Every town begins to schedule itself around the training calendar. Tailors make uniforms as side business. Schools pause classes when drills require the students' older brothers. Weddings and harvests are planned around service years. Military life seeps into culture. Punctuality, cleanliness, obedience, all virtues of the barracks become social norms. Children play parade in the streets. Mothers teach sons to stand straight before they can even write their names. In Prussia, the phrase "every man a soldier" is not metaphor, it's mission. And yet, for all its unifying power, this system also divides. Wealthier families still find ways to soften the burden, sending sons into officer schools or administrative roles, while poorer men do the hard marching. Historians still argue whether this universal service was truly egalitarian or simply efficient class management. But what can't be denied is its scale. By the 1850s, nearly every adult male in Prussia has received at least basic military training. That's hundreds of thousands of citizens who can read a map, follow orders, and fix a rifle in the dark. It's not just an army, it's a social contract. This enormous pool of trained men forms the foundation of something extraordinary, a reserve system. After serving their active duty, soldiers return to civilian life but remain on call. If war breaks out, they can be reactivated within days. This principle, the nation in arms, will later allow Prussia to mobilize faster than any European power. Picture it: a blacksmith hammering iron in a Rhineland forge, who at the sound of a drumbeat drops his tools, dons his old uniform, and boards a train to the front within 48 hours. To the modern mind, it seems miraculous, but to a Prussian, it's simply Tuesday. Meanwhile, officers refine how this vast human network operates. The general staff begins mapping rail lines, calculating mobilization times, rehearsing logistics. The dream is seamless efficiency, a military that can materialize anywhere, anytime. The Landwehr and the regular army become two halves of the same organism, breathing as one. Of course, not everyone loves this new militarized life. Liberal thinkers in the 1840s criticized the system, arguing that it turned citizens into automatons. Poets complain that uniforms have replaced imagination. Even within the army, some worry that discipline is killing initiative. "We are building an army of clockwork men," one officer writes. But what if the clock breaks? Still, there's no denying the results. When the 1848 revolutions erupt across Europe, Prussia's conscripts march with speed and precision that astonish their neighbors. While other monarchies crumble under the chaos, the Prussian king holds his throne. Ironically, the same reforms that once threatened royal authority now save it. And yet, beneath the polished surface, something quietly shifts. The Landwehr, once a symbol of popular patriotism, becomes increasingly professionalized. By the 1850s, the monarchy tightens control, limiting local elections and restoring aristocratic dominance in officer ranks. What began as a democratic experiment slowly crystallizes into the engine of the conservative state. You can almost feel the tension between past and future vibrating beneath the surface. The idea of the citizen soldier remains, but it's being bent toward a different purpose: the consolidation of Prussian power. Let's lighten the tone for a moment. There's a story, half legend, half truth, of a Prussian tailor named Friedrich who, after serving his term, returned to his shop but kept his rifle hanging by the door. When a nobleman asked why he still polished it weekly, Friedrich replied, "Because the French still exist." That pretty much sums up the mood of the nation. Even daily routines mirror military discipline. Work begins at dawn. Meals are punctual. Streets are spotless. The state doesn't just train its soldiers, it trains its citizens to think like soldiers. Bureaucracy and battle strategy share the same DNA. By mid-century, this tight bond between army and society becomes a defining feature of the Prussian model. Foreign observers coin a phrase for it: der preußische Militarismus, Prussian militarism. Depending on who says it, it's either admiration or warning. But for Prussia, it's simply natural. To live is to serve is to strengthen. Even art reflects it: sculptures of stoic soldiers, songs about duty and sacrifice. You might think it bleak, but the Prussians see beauty in order. And here lies one of the great open debates of history. Did this system elevate the individual through shared responsibility, or suppress him beneath the weight of collective purpose? Historians still can't agree. Perhaps it's both: discipline that inspires and obedience that confines. The effects ripple through generations. A boy grows up watching his father leave for drills, knowing he'll do the same. Families keep meticulous records of service: names, regiments, battles. It becomes heritage, even pride. In a sense, conscription doesn't just produce soldiers, it produces identity. Now, as you walk away from that misty training field, you can hear church bells mingling with drum beats. It's impossible to tell where prayer ends and parade begins. That's the essence of Prussia's transformation, when faith, family, and the flag all march in the same step. What began as a desperate survival measure has evolved into the spine of a nation. The defeats of the past are no longer scars, they're muscles, hardened through repetition. Prussia's citizens have become its shield, and soon, that shield will turn into a sword. You wake to the smell of gun oil and morning frost. The year is 1820-something, and Prussia is already a country obsessed with movement, feet pounding, rifles snapping, minds calculating. In the open field, beyond the garrison walls, this is the age when Prussia begins turning the body and the mind into twin engines of national purpose. It's not enough to have an army. It must be the smartest and strongest army on earth. From the parade ground to the university classroom, a single principle governs life: discipline. The body learns obedience, the mind learns initiative, and together, they form the uniquely Prussian blend of precision and independence that terrifies neighbors and fascinates historians. Drill, of course, is nothing new. Armies have been practicing formations since the Romans, but the Prussians elevate it into something almost spiritual. The infantry doesn't just march, it thinks as it moves. Every soldier is trained to understand the purpose behind his action, not merely to execute it. It's the difference between a cog and a gear. Each man knows his place in the greater machinery. There's your mainstream historical fact. Prussian military doctrine in the early 19th century emphasized initiative within obedience, or what later becomes known as Auftragstaktik, mission-type command. Instead of following rigid orders, officers are encouraged to interpret their objectives and act independently if communications break down. It's a radical idea in an era when most armies still punish deviation as disobedience. But here's the quirky tidbit. This philosophy was practiced even in gymnasiums. Physical education became compulsory in Prussian schools, not for fun, but for readiness. Gymnastics clubs known as Turnverein doubled as nationalist youth groups. Their founder, Friedrich Ludwig Jahn, believed that strong bodies made strong patriots. He once declared, "The gymnasium is the training ground of liberty." So yes, every handstand, vault, and push-up carried the weight of patriotism. You can imagine the scene. Boys in white shirts and suspenders leaping over wooden horses, chanting patriotic songs as they stretch. It's both adorable and mildly terrifying. The Prussians have managed to turn PE class into a prelude to mobilization. By the 1830s, this fusion of physical and intellectual rigor becomes a national religion. Civilians emulate soldiers. Soldiers emulate scholars. A teacher might conduct roll call like a sergeant, while an officer might quote Latin aphorisms on the parade ground. The state no longer distinguishes between civilian virtue and military virtue. They're one and the same. This is where the Prussian miracle begins to look less like coincidence and more like choreography. Every element of society is rehearsing for the same performance. Bureaucrats calculate with the same precision that soldiers aim. Engineers design bridges sturdy enough for artillery. Train conductors memorize schedules as if they were battle plans. It's not just order, it's synchronization on a national scale. And yet, beneath the gleaming surface, there's an undercurrent of anxiety. To keep the machine running, someone must constantly tighten its bolts. Officers inspect endlessly. Teachers grade harshly. Bureaucrats document every infraction. Perfection becomes both the goal and the obsession. The military manuals of the period read like a mix of philosophy and clockwork. Marching tempos are standardized to exact paces per minute. Uniform colors are specified down to the shade. Even boot heels are measured for identical height, so the rhythm of a battalion marching past echoes like one enormous heartbeat. You could call it art, or you could call it the world's most disciplined case of collective OCD. Historians still argue whether this obsession with precision made the Prussian army more adaptable or more brittle. Did it produce commanders capable of improvisation, or just soldiers too scared to fail? The debate lingers, but there's no denying that it produced results. Under generals like Karl von Muffling and later Helmuth von Moltke, Prussian training becomes legendary. Soldiers rehearse field maneuvers with such realism that neighboring peasants mistake them for actual battles. Tactical exercises are conducted not just on foot, but with maps and sand tables, early versions of war games. By simulating chaos, they prepare for it. And somewhere in a corner of a smoky tavern, an officer sketches ideas for new marching formations on a beer coaster. Because yes, some of the greatest tactical innovations of the 19th century probably began over a pint of lager. The spirit of reform reaches deep into logistics too. Supply chains, transportation, and communication become scientific pursuits. Horses are categorized by strength and stamina. Field rations are optimized for nutrition and portability. Even the army's cookbooks are standardized. A Prussian soldier might not get much, but he'll get it efficiently. Here's where you can really see the character of the nation forming. Efficiency becomes its own moral code. Waste is weakness. Laziness, a sin. The ideal Prussian officer isn't flamboyant or charismatic. He's calm, methodical, quietly terrifying in his competence. Think of him as the opposite of Napoleon. Less fireworks, more spreadsheets. And yet, humor has its place. There's an old saying among recruits: in Prussia, everything is forbidden, but it works. You can't laugh too loudly, but you can certainly laugh quietly, as long as it's on schedule. The fusion of mental and physical discipline also shapes the officer corps into a unique social class. These men see themselves as the embodiment of the state's virtues, educated, restrained. At the same time, civilians begin adopting similar mottos in their own work. Factory managers quote generals. Generals study management theory. Prussia becomes a place where even failure is treated as a logistical error to be corrected, not a tragedy to be lamented. One evening, you wander into a Berlin cafe and overhear a group of young men arguing about Clausewitz's On War. One insists that war is merely politics by other means, while another counters that it's the ultimate test of national character. Outside, a regiment marches past. Inside, the debate continues. It's a perfect metaphor for the new Prussia, an army that thinks, a society that drills, and a people who can intellectualize both. Of course, not everyone is comfortable with this militarized intellect. Poets like Heinrich Heine mock it, describing Prussia as a school where the ruler is the headmaster and the citizens are all pupils. Yet even his satire acknowledges the system's effectiveness. The trains run on time. The soldiers win their wars. The citizens behave. And here's a charming paradox. Prussians are both the most orderly and the most self-conscious people in Europe. They measure their punctuality with pride, but secretly wonder if the French are having more fun. Historians still argue whether this cultural duality, rigor mixed with insecurity, made Prussia resilient or neurotic. Maybe both. You watch the soldiers conclude their morning drill. They stand motionless for a heartbeat, then break ranks, laughing softly as they sling rifles over shoulders. A few light cigarettes. One hums a folk tune. The transformation is startling. One moment they're a machine, the next, they're men again. That's the key. The system works not because it crushes individuality, but because it teaches when to switch it off and on. This balance, obedience and initiative, conformity and creativity, becomes the hallmark of the Prussian model. It's what later generals like Moltke will call freedom within the framework of order. And so, as the day fades, the soldiers return to their barracks, where lessons continue, history lectures, map reading, even foreign languages. A Prussian soldier is expected to write clearly, calculate precisely, and fight relentlessly. It's an intimidating resume. You lie back on the grass outside the training ground, watching a formation disappear over the hill. The last sunlight catches the steel of their bayonets, flashing like a line of stars. It's beautiful in a cold, symmetrical way, like a symphony where every note is predetermined but played to perfection. Discipline, intellect, endurance, these are no longer separate virtues. They're one. And together, they will soon propel Prussia beyond recovery into dominance. The year is 1840, and you're standing inside a drafty barracks where officers lounge around a pot-bellied stove, sipping bitter coffee and poring over maps. The smoke hangs thick in the air, curling between epaulets and sword scabbards. These are not pampered nobles anymore. They are the products of reform, the new Prussian officer corps. You can tell by the way they argue. One jabs at the map with a compass, muttering about railway timetables. Another quotes Clausewitz, insisting that no plan survives contact with the enemy. They speak like engineers and philosophers, not aristocrats. And that's the whole point. Over the past 2 decades, Prussia has quietly completed one of the most radical social experiments in Europe, replacing birthright with brain power. The officer corps, once the playground of Junker nobles, has been reshaped into a meritocratic machine. You no longer inherit command. You earn it through education, exams, and endurance. That's your mainstream historical fact. By mid-century, roughly half of Prussian officers come from middle-class or non-noble backgrounds, a transformation unmatched anywhere else in Europe. Promotion depends increasingly on merit and performance, not lineage. It doesn't mean the Junkers disappear. They still hold sway, especially in cavalry and high command. But even they must now study and test. In this new order, a farmer's son with perfect geometry scores can outrank a baron's heir who flunked logistics. This shift doesn't happen overnight. In the early years, the old guard scoffs. Books don't win battles, they grumble. But after the campaigns of 1813 to 15, where educated staff officers outmaneuvered aristocratic bluster, even skeptics start taking notes. Quite literally, they enroll in the new Kriegsakademie to learn the art of modern command. Here's a quirky tidbit. The entrance exam for staff training included mathematics problems so difficult that university professors occasionally failed them. Imagine generals sweating over algebra before being allowed to command troops. Only in Prussia could trigonometry become a test of valor. Inside the General Staff building on Baronstrasse, young officers spend years mastering not just tactics, but logistics, engineering, cartography, and statistics. They analyze every battle of Napoleon, sketch maps of imaginary campaigns, and run exercises where one group invades Saxony on paper while another defends it. Their instructors don't care who wins, only how efficiently they plan. The result is a professional elite unlike any Europe has seen. They're not warriors in the romantic sense. They're analysts in uniform. When they speak of honor, it's not about duels or titles. It's about competence. Their true weapon is preparation. At first glance, it sounds cold, even mechanical. But watch one of these men lead a company in the field, and you'll see something else. A kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. They don't shout orders. They issue them once, calmly, and everyone obeys. The men trust that if their officer says, "Follow me," he's already calculated the odds. Historians still argue whether this new class of officers represented a genuine meritocracy or simply a more efficient aristocracy. After all, the General Staff became so prestigious that even commoners within it started behaving like nobles. Stiff posture, clipped tones, impeccable grooming. Merit, it turns out, can be as snobbish as birthright. You stroll through the corridors of the academy one evening. A group of cadets sits hunched over maps by candlelight. They're debating the best way to cross a river under fire. One argues for engineering pontoons. Another suggests diverting the current with a temporary dam. Outside, snowflakes drift past the windows, settling on the cobblestones of a city that hums with discipline. This environment breeds innovation. Officers are encouraged to write essays proposing new weapons, new formations, even new philosophies of war. Those ideas don't vanish into drawers. They're circulated, discussed, and tested in war games. The army becomes a laboratory. Meanwhile, the state ensures that civilian education keeps pace. Universities produce engineers, chemists, and mathematicians who will later apply their skills to artillery, railways, and telegraphs. It's as though the entire nation is conspiring to make efficiency contagious. And somewhere, quietly observing all this, is a man named Helmuth von Moltke, a small, precise figure with a mind like a clock and a face that never seems to blink. He will soon rise to become chief of the general staff and the living embodiment of this new meritocratic ideal. But for now, he's just another student of the system, watching, noting, learning. It's hard to overstate what this transformation means for Europe. Other armies still rely on charisma and courage. Prussia relies on calculation. A French general once joked that the Prussians bring accountants to a gunfight. He wasn't wrong, but those accountants will one day win entire wars. Of course, meritocracy has its downsides. It rewards intellect, but also breeds bureaucracy. Every report, every movement, every skirmish must be documented and filed. The army becomes addicted to paperwork. Soldiers joke that the Prussian army could fight without bullets, but never without forms. Still, the efficiency is undeniable. In peacetime, the officer corps runs the state like a second government. They oversee census data, railway planning, and even public education. The lines between military and civil service blur almost completely. You could say Prussia has achieved total integration of its brain and muscle. One evening, a senior general visits the academy and gives a lecture on duty. His words echo across generations. You are not here to seek glory, but to serve precision. It sounds austere, but it's also liberating. To the Prussian officer, greatness isn't about being noticed. It's about being right. Here's the irony. By abolishing aristocratic privilege, Prussia accidentally creates a new kind of nobility, one based on intellect and efficiency. It's not a class you're born into, it's one you test into. And that makes it both more open and more ruthless. Fail an exam, and you're done. No second chances. The system also shapes character. Officers learn restraint, composure, and endurance. Emotion is frowned upon. Punctuality is sacred. There's a story, likely exaggerated, that Moltke once fined a colonel for arriving 5 minutes early because it meant he hadn't managed his time efficiently. That's the kind of precision we're dealing with. But beneath the discipline lies something deeper, faith in the system itself. These officers believe that if every man does his job perfectly, victory is inevitable. It's a belief that will carry them through 3 great wars of unification and perhaps blind them later to the unpredictability of human nature. Historians still debate whether this professional ethos made Prussia more humane or more dangerous. Did a well-trained, rational army reduce the chaos of war or simply make it more efficient? The question has haunted Europe ever since. As you leave the academy, you pass a young cadet staring at the stars. He murmurs something about destiny, perhaps a poem he half remembers from Schiller. The lamp beside him flickers, casting the iron gates in silhouette. Beyond them lies a world soon to be reshaped by men like him, officers who think in blueprints and act in lightning. For now, though, the night is calm. Inside the barracks, the clatter of boots has faded. The maps are rolled up, the ink drying on another day's work of perfection. Somewhere, a clock strikes 10, and every officer in the building knows exactly what that means. Order. Always order, but within it, the quiet hum of genius. You wake to the hiss of steam and the whistle of iron. The year is 1850, and Prussia's once muddy roads now tremble under the weight of locomotives. Black smoke coils into the sky, and the rhythm of the rails becomes the new heartbeat of a nation. The clang of industry echoes in the distance, factories belching sparks, furnaces roaring like caged beasts. Steel and steam have arrived, and with them, a new kind of power. In less than a generation, Prussia leaps from a kingdom of muskets and horse carts to a state of telegraphs and railways. The Industrial Revolution, slow to start in the east, finally surges through the German lands. And because this is Prussia, it doesn't arrive chaotically. It arrives systematically. The same precision that governed its soldiers now governs its engineers. You walk through a workshop in the Ruhr Valley, where soot-covered men in aprons hammer red-hot metal into gun barrels. Each strike rings like a drumbeat of destiny. Rifles, cannon barrels, and machine parts roll off the lines in quantities unthinkable just decades before. For the first time in European history, a state and its industry are working in lockstep, not just to build, but to prepare. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Between 1848 and 1870, Prussia's rail network grows from under 3,000 kilometers to more than 18,000, an explosion that gives it unmatched mobility in war. Trains are not just for passengers, they're for armies. And here's the quirky tidbit. The Prussian army once ran mock invasions using empty trains, sending them back and forth between depots just to test timing. Locals complained that ghost soldiers were haunting the railways at night, iron rehearsals for real wars to come. The telegraph lines spread just as quickly. Messages that once took days now travel in minutes. Commanders can issue orders across provinces before breakfast and receive confirmation by lunch. Moltke, ever the tactician, famously quipped that strategy ends when the first telegram is sent, because the speed of information changes everything. In the War Ministry, clerks hunched over ticking telegraph machines while officers mark maps with colored pins. Mobility becomes mathematics. No longer do armies crawl on the rhythm of horses and couriers. They glide on schedules, measured in hours instead of days. You watch Moltke study a railway timetable as if it were scripture. He sees not steel and steam, but arteries pumping lifeblood through the state. He plans campaigns not on geography, but on logistics. Every station, every junction, every bridge is a potential weapon. In his mind, victory is a matter of punctuality. This synthesis of technology and military planning turns Prussia into something Europe has never seen before, a modern war machine that moves at industrial speed. Historians still argue whether Moltke was the first true systems thinker in warfare, a general who saw not just troops and terrain, but infrastructure, communications, and production as part of one living organism. And what an organism it is. Iron mines in the Rhineland feed steel mills in the Ruhr, which in turn forge rails and rifles for armies stationed in East Prussia. Telegraph poles follow those rails like veins, carrying messages to the general staff in Berlin. It's not just supply, it's symbiosis. Even civilians feel it. Telegraph offices open next to train depots. Factories schedule shifts around train timetables. The whole kingdom hums in unison. The Prussian word Betrieb, operation, now applies equally to machines, factories, and people. The nation itself has become one great machine. You stand on a platform as a military train thunders by. Flat cars stacked with artillery, horse wagons, and barrels of ammunition. Soldiers wave from the cars, their faces pale in the steam. They're not going to war yet, but they could. The system is ready. And with every mile of track, the old feudal geography of Europe dissolves a little more. Distance, that ancient barrier, is shrinking. The same technology that brings Prussia wealth and unity also makes its army omnipresent. For the first time, the state can truly arrive anywhere it chooses, fast. Of course, technology changes more than logistics. It changes psychology. The telegraph and railway teach people to think in timetables and sequences. Even war begins to look like a schedule. The Prussian army invents mobilization plans so detailed that officers joke, if the French invade on a Sunday, we'll be ready by Monday at 6 a.m. But industrialization has another side, a darker one. The same furnaces that forge rails also forge rifles, and the same discipline that keeps factories productive keeps society rigid. Towns expand, cities darken with smog, and laborers march to work under the same clock that regulates army drills. You walk through Berlin at dusk. Gas lamps flickering, streetcars rattling, chimneys breathing black plumes. The city smells of coal and ambition. Above the noise, you hear a telegraph wire hum faintly, a kind of metallic whisper, reminding everyone that somewhere, someone is always listening. One young officer pauses to gaze up at that humming wire and murmurs, "We have conquered distance, but not ourselves." He might be right. Historians still argue whether Prussia's technological success brought enlightenment or simply a more efficient hierarchy. Yet there's no denying that this synthesis of science and structure gives the kingdom its decisive edge. Every innovation, breech-loading rifles, cast steel cannon, quick assembly bridges, feeds directly into doctrine. When Moltke later orders troops to move by rail, communicate by wire, and fight by will, it's not poetry, it's policy. A favorite anecdote among Prussian officers tells of a drill in which Moltke inspected a train loaded with soldiers. He asked the conductor when they would reach Dresden. The man replied, "At 11:52 exactly, Your Excellency." Moltke looked at his watch, nodded, and said, "Then we shall win." Meanwhile, universities fuel the machine with talent. The Berlin Polytechnic trains engineers who build guns and rail bridges. Chemists refine gunpowder. Mathematicians optimize supply routes. The boundary between science and war dissolves. In Prussia, research is patriotism. Still, there's something eerie about the efficiency. Standing in a telegraph office late at night, you can hear a line clicking endlessly. Signals sent, received, relayed. No emotion, no pause, just precision. The operator looks half asleep, his hand moving automatically, tapping out coded orders that could summon an army. The machine and man have merged, and yet, amid all the smoke and steel, the Prussians retain their peculiar sense of humor. "We used to march on foot," one factory worker jokes. "Now we ride on rails, but still uphill, both ways." They complain about soot and noise, but secretly, they're proud. Progress feels like destiny. The transformation doesn't go unnoticed abroad. French and Austrian newspapers call Prussia the land of iron men and iron roads. British observers marvel and worry at how seamlessly the army and industry cooperate. Everyone can sense it. The world is tilting, and Berlin is becoming its new center of gravity. But with progress comes pressure. Industrial society breeds expectations, faster growth, bigger armies, tighter control. Workers strike, liberals demand reform, and revolution simmers in the smoke-filled air. To keep order, the state relies ever more on its military. Those same rails that deliver goods can deliver soldiers to any rebellious city within hours. Efficiency cuts both ways. Historians still debate whether Prussia's industrial miracle was driven by vision or paranoia. Did it build the machines because it dreamed of greatness, or because it feared another Napoleon? Either way, it succeeds. By the late 1850s, the foundations are complete. The army is mobile, the nation is connected, and the state's bureaucracy ticks with mechanical precision. The kingdom of drill masters has become an empire of engineers in all but name. As you stand once more on that platform, a freight train rumbles by, sparks streaking into the night. The engineer leans out, waving a soot-blackened hand. Behind him, the carriages stretch into infinity, each one carrying tools, rifles, and dreams of unity. The ground vibrates under your feet, the air smells of iron and oil, and you realize that this sound, the clatter of steel on steel, is the anthem of the new Prussia. Tomorrow, these same rails will carry armies to glory. But tonight, they carry only promise. You wake to a summer dawn rolling across the Elbe River. Church bells echo from the spires of Dresden, but the air feels heavy, like history itself is holding its breath. The year is 1865. Across the German-speaking world, something vast and uncertain is stirring. The old dual monarchy of Austria and the rising kingdom of Prussia are circling each other like wolves on the same mountain. Both claim to guard Germany's destiny. Only one will rule it. To understand this tension, you must look beyond muskets and borders. It's about vision. For centuries, Austria has been the senior partner of the German Confederation, presiding over its affairs with imperial pomp. But Prussia, rebuilt from ruin, now bristles with new industry, new confidence, and new ideas. The two powers no longer fit inside the same house. One dreams of unity through empire, the other through efficiency. In Berlin, Otto von Bismarck, sharp eyes, walrus mustache, iron patience, has become the architect of destiny. As minister-president, he sees the map of Europe not as a puzzle, but as a chessboard. Every alliance, every speech, every mobilization is a move, and like all good players, he's already 10 moves ahead. Bismarck's genius isn't that he loves war, it's that he understands when to use it. He calls it Realpolitik, politics of reality. Not by speeches and majority decisions, he tells the parliament, but by iron and blood will the great questions of our time be decided. It's not a metaphor, it's a promise. That's your mainstream historical fact. Bismarck deliberately engineers tensions with Austria to provoke a decisive conflict. His strategy is to isolate Vienna diplomatically, secure neutrality from France and Russia, and then unleash Prussia's modernized army for a lightning strike. But here's your quirky tidbit. During one of his early meetings with King Wilhelm I, Bismarck reportedly brought a tray of cigars and said, "Majesty, today we decide whether to smoke or to burn." The king laughed, but he understood. Underneath the humor lay the same cold logic that would soon set Europe ablaze. The rivalry between Prussia and Austria isn't just military, it's ideological. Austria represents the old order, Catholic, multinational, aristocratic. Prussia represents something leaner and more focused, Protestant, bureaucratic, national. It's not just who will rule Germany, it's what Germany will be. You walk through the bustling streets of Berlin. Posters shout patriotism, newspapers whisper rumors of war. In cafes, officers argue over maps of Bohemia. In universities, students debate whether German unity should mean liberty or strength. And in the War Ministry, General Helmuth von Moltke quietly draws red lines across the map. Rail routes, river crossings, supply depots. He doesn't shout, doesn't boast, doesn't threaten. He simply prepares. By now, Prussia's army is a symphony of precision. Mobilization plans have been rehearsed for years. Rail timetables are memorized, telegraph lines tested. Soldiers know exactly how many days it takes to reach the front. No more, no less. Austria, by contrast, still relies on slow communication and scattered reserves. Its vast empire is strong on paper, but brittle in motion. Historians still argue whether war was inevitable or carefully staged. Some say the rivalry would have cooled if diplomacy prevailed. Others believe that both nations were trapped by momentum, the logic of railways and pride. Either way, Bismarck knows timing is everything. He begins by picking a pretext. In 1864, Prussia and Austria jointly invade Denmark over the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. When victory comes, the spoils become the spark. Prussia claims administrative control of Schleswig. Austria takes Holstein. It's a temporary arrangement meant to fail. Within 2 years, disputes flare, and the joint occupation collapses into hostility. In Vienna, diplomats call Prussia arrogant. In Berlin, Bismarck calls Austria obsolete. The stage is set. Picture the scene on the eve of war in 1866. Railway stations flooded with troops, telegraph operators hammering out coded orders, supply trains rolling east under banners of black and white. The mood isn't frenzy, it's focus. Unlike the grand musters of old Europe, Prussia's mobilization is quiet, mathematical. Every man knows where he's going, every horse where to stand. And when the war finally begins, it moves like thunder. The Austro-Prussian War lasts barely 7 weeks. From June to July 1866, Prussia's modern army sweeps across Bohemia. its needle rifles and rail-borne reinforcements shredding Austrian formations that still march by foot. The decisive battle at Königgrätz, or Sadowa, becomes legend. 400,000 men clash across rolling fields, and by day's end, the Austrian army is broken. The reason is simple and terrifying: efficiency. Moltke's corps commanders act independently, yet in perfect harmony. Guided by his telegraphed directives, when one flank falters, another presses forward. No one waits for central orders. The doctrine of Auftragstaktik, initiative within intent, proves its worth. Here's a curious detail from that battle. At one point, a Prussian division advanced too far and risked encirclement. Instead of retreating, its commander, on his own initiative, attacked an unexpected hill and disrupted the Austrian artillery. Moltke later remarked, "Better an energetic mistake than a passive correctness." That line would become gospel for modern military thought. As the dust settles over Königgrätz, the balance of Europe shifts overnight. Austria sues for peace. Bismarck, ever cautious, refuses to humiliate them. He wants no enemies, only lessons learned. In the peace that follows, Austria is expelled from German affairs, and Prussia takes the lead in forming the North German Confederation. In a single campaign, Prussia achieves what centuries of diplomacy could not: the unification of most German states under its leadership. But even victory has its iron cost. The army, now proven invincible, becomes the core of national pride. Statues rise to generals. Schoolbooks praise obedience and sacrifice. You can feel it in the streets, the swagger of triumph, the certainty of destiny. For the first time, the German question seems answered. Berlin, not Vienna, will decide the future. Still, a few voices whisper caution. Historians still debate whether Bismarck's restraint after victory was prudence or arrogance. He spared Austria, yes, but he also left a power nursing resentment. Future storms are already gathering behind polite handshakes. You stroll through a Berlin park that summer, where children play with toy rifles and sing marching songs. The smell of victory still lingers in the air. Newspapers hail Moltke as a genius and Bismarck as a savior. The king becomes the symbol of unity, but behind the applause lies exhaustion. Thousands dead, cities grieving, families broken. Even in triumph, Prussia learns that modern war is as efficient at killing as it is at conquering. In Vienna, meanwhile, the Austrian emperor sighs and reorganizes what remains of his empire, turning it into Austria-Hungary, a reluctant compromise born from defeat. The Habsburg dream of leading Germany is over, and in Berlin, Bismarck watches the map again. The chessboard has changed. Prussia now dominates northern Germany, but the southern states, Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, remain wary, clinging to their independence. To unite them, something even larger will be required. For now, though, the drums of victory fade into the hum of reconstruction. Telegraph lines are repaired, metals are struck, and railway timetables return to normal. You stand at the Brandenburg Gate, watching soldiers march home under fluttering flags. They look older, quieter, but their eyes burn with the knowledge that they've helped forge something unstoppable. The Prussian eagle soars higher than ever, its wings spanning half of Europe. Yet deep down, you can sense that it's not done flying. There's still one more rival to face, one more empire to eclipse, one more war to define an age. The shadow on the horizon? France. You wake to the rumble of drums and the chatter of telegraph wires. The year is 1870, and Prussia's banners ripple in the summer wind. Europe's balance of power trembles again, this time to the west. France, still proud, still imperial under Napoleon III, watches nervously as Prussia's network of alliances tightens like a steel trap. The Austrian eagle has been humbled, the German north united under Berlin's watchful gaze. Only one great obstacle remains between Prussia and complete German unification: the Empire of France. The tension has been building for years. France fears encirclement, resents Prussia's rising prestige, and cannot bear to see a new power rise in Central Europe. Napoleon III, nephew of the great Napoleon I, wants one more triumph to secure his legacy. But in Berlin, Otto von Bismarck is already spinning the web. He knows that if Prussia fights France, the southern German states, Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, will rally to the cause of defending the fatherland. War, if handled correctly, will finish the work of unification. That's your mainstream historical fact. Bismarck manipulates events surrounding the Ems dispatch, a doctored telegram from King Wilhelm I, to provoke French outrage and declare war first. In July 1870, France does exactly that. But here's your quirky tidbit. The original telegram wasn't even meant for the press. Bismarck edited it so brutally that one French diplomat described it as a dual invitation printed for the world. It's perhaps the most successful case of strategic trolling in 19th century politics. When the news breaks, Paris erupts in cheers. Crowds sing La Marseillaise, convinced that a swift war will restore French honor. But they don't yet understand what they're facing. The Prussian war machine of 1870 isn't the fumbling force of 1806. It's an industrial organism of precision and speed. You follow the mobilization in Berlin. The streets fill with orderly chaos, men reporting to depots, trains hissing steam, horses stamping on cobblestones. Within 10 days, 500,000 soldiers are under arms, their movements synchronized by rail and telegraph. Clerks track every rifle and ration. Engineers map every mile of track. It's not mobilization, it's choreography. France, by contrast, lags behind. Its mobilization system still relies on paper lists and postal couriers. Regiments assemble late, supplies go missing, and generals bicker over commands. Historians still argue whether the French army of 1870 was undone by incompetence or arrogance, but either way, it's outmatched before a shot is fired. Moltke, now the venerable chief of the general staff, oversees everything from his quiet office in Berlin. He doesn't shout or boast. He simply calculates. His plan is straightforward. 3 armies advance along converging routes through the Rhineland, trap the French main force near the border, and drive straight toward Paris. The pace will be relentless, an orchestra of railways, rifles, and willpower. The war begins in earnest on August 4th. At Wissembourg, Prussian and Bavarian troops smash the French frontier defenses. Within days, the Battle of Wörth follows, then Spicheren, then the Great Encirclement at Sedan. You stand on a hill as the thunder of cannon rolls across the fields. The smell of powder fills your lungs, the ground trembles beneath your boots. Below, lines of blue-coated French infantry stumble through the smoke, their formations collapsing under waves of needle gun fire. The Prussian troops move like clockwork, advancing by companies, reloading in rotation. Officers raise binoculars instead of sabers. Orders arrive by courier and telegraph, perfectly timed. It's war conducted like mathematics. The decisive moment comes at Sedan on September 1st. The French army, over 100,000 strong, is surrounded. Napoleon III himself, pale and defeated, rides forward under a white flag. "I did not wish this," he murmurs, handing over his sword. In Berlin, Bismarck smiles grimly. The emperor's surrender means more than victory. It means legitimacy. The southern German states rally instantly to Prussia. The German unification that diplomacy could not secure has been sealed in blood. Here's a small, strange anecdote. When Prussian troops captured Napoleon III's carriage, they found inside a silver travel set, a library of French novels, and a case of expensive cologne. One Prussian soldier quipped, "He came prepared for everything but war." As the French emperor departs into captivity, His empire collapses behind him. Paris declares a republic. The people vow to resist. But Moltke is already moving. Trains roll westward, artillery thunders, and within weeks the Prussian armies encircle Paris itself. The siege that follows is both brutal and methodical. The city starves. Pigeons and even zoo animals become rations. Balloons drift out carrying desperate messages. The French fire their new chassepot rifles and mitrailleuses, early machine guns, but it's too little, too late. Against rail-borne logistics and steel discipline, improvisation can't hold. You walk through a Prussian camp outside the city. Soldiers sit around campfires, writing letters home by lantern light. One fiddles with a pocket telegraph, tapping messages to headquarters. "We hear the church bells from Paris," he says quietly, "but they're not ringing for victory." Back in Berlin, King Wilhelm I receives dispatches in his study. Around him stand Bismarck and Moltke, one the strategist of politics, the other of war. Together they have turned Prussia into the nerve center of a new empire, and they know the climax is near. On January 18th, 1871, in the glittering Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the German princes gather to proclaim Wilhelm Emperor of a united Germany. The irony is deliberate. The palace built by French glory now hosts Prussia's triumph. As trumpets sound and banners unfurl, Bismarck stands silent, his face unreadable. He's not celebrating, he's calculating. He knows that today's victory will define Europe for generations, for better or worse. That's your mainstream historical fact. The proclamation of the German Empire in Versailles marks the official birth of Germany as a unified nation-state, with Prussia at its core. And your fringe tidbit? When the ceremony ends, a French cleaning staff secretly mops the floor with vinegar to purify it from German footsteps. Even in defeat, pride finds small rebellions. The world looks on in awe and apprehension. Britain sees a new continental giant rising. Russia senses a rival in strategy. France seethes in humiliation. The Prussian model, discipline, meritocracy, technology, and speed, has proven itself unstoppable. Historians still debate whether the unification was an inevitable result of progress or the calculated work of a few extraordinary minds. Maybe both. Yet beneath the triumph, there's a strange quiet. You stand outside Versailles after the ceremony. The winter air is cold and sharp. Soldiers cheer, but their cheers sound tired. Bismarck lights a cigar and exhales slowly. "We have created a monster," he murmurs. Not from arrogance, but recognition. The machine built to defend Prussia now commands all Germany. Its strength is immense, but so is its inertia. Once set in motion, who will stop it? Back home, Berlin erupts in jubilation. Fireworks burst above the Spree and school children wave flags stitched by their mothers. Songs praise Kaiser Wilhelm unser Held. But even amid the celebrations, the rhythm of order continues. Factory whistles blow at dawn. Trains run precisely on time. The machine never sleeps. You walk through the Tiergarten as snow begins to fall. The lamps flicker, the city glows, and you realize how far Prussia has come since the humiliations of 1806. From the ashes of defeat to the empire of efficiency. It's a journey measured not only in victories, but in the transformation of an entire society. The soldiers who once trudged barefoot through Jena now march beneath iron eagles. The bureaucrats who once begged for reform now govern an empire of steel and steam. The classroom drills, the railway rehearsals, the merit exams, all of it has converged into this moment. And yet, you sense the faintest unease, like a tremor beneath the triumph. The same order that built this empire could, someday, trap it. But that's for another night. For now, the banners of black, white, and red ripple above the frozen city, and somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of a telegraph line carries the words that will echo through time. The German Empire is proclaimed. You wake to the silence that follows triumph, the uneasy quiet that lingers after a storm. The year is 1871, and the ink on the Treaty of Frankfurt is barely dry. France, humbled and humiliated, has ceded Alsace and Lorraine. Prussian troops still patrol the outskirts of Paris. The drums have stopped, but their echo still rattles through Europe. The question is no longer if Prussia will dominate, it's how it will sustain that dominance. You walk through the corridors of the Grosser Generalstab, the Prussian General Staff headquarters in Berlin. It smells faintly of ink and tobacco, and every desk is buried under maps, reports, and railway timetables. The men here are not just officers, they're architects of empire. Each holds the fate of nations in his pen. This is the real power behind the new Germany, a brain made of paper and precision. The General Staff, founded decades earlier by Scharnhorst and perfected by Moltke, is now the most sophisticated military institution in the world. It operates like a living organism, collecting intelligence, planning campaigns, drafting contingency plans for every conceivable scenario. In an age when most European armies still rely on charismatic commanders, the Prussians rely on organization. Strategy has been industrialized. That's your mainstream historical fact. The Prussian General Staff system, later adopted by nearly every major army, formalized the process of continuous planning, wargaming, and professional education. It's the ancestor of modern operational command. Here's your quirky tidbit. Officers serving on the General Staff were issued special crimson stripes for their trousers. Berliners jokingly called them Kriegsdoktoren, doctors of war. They weren't entirely wrong. Inside these walls, war was dissected, analyzed, and cured of its unpredictability. You can almost hear the ticking of the Great Wall clock as officers brief Moltke on the next problem: demobilization, border defense, potential uprisings. He listens quietly, pencil in hand, occasionally jotting a note. Moltke believes in systems, not speeches. No plan survives contact with the enemy, he says, but planning is indispensable. The paradox makes perfect sense to him. If you think hard enough about chaos, you can control most of it. Under his guidance, Germany begins to institutionalize success. Every regiment, every division, every supply chain is studied and improved. Military geography becomes a science, logistics an art form. Rail networks expand to the frontiers, each one color-coded for wartime conversion. Telegraph lines stretch deeper into the provinces. You could almost say that Prussia's obsession with punctuality has found its divine purpose: to make war run on time. But it's not just the army that's adapting. Civil society mirrors the military's efficiency. Bureaucrats adopt the General Staff model for governance, collecting data, planning contingencies, standardizing procedures. The same meticulous culture that organized battles now organizes cities, schools, and taxes. Germany becomes the first truly managerial nation in history. Still, there's something chilling in the perfection. The system works too well. Every problem seems solvable through planning. Every crisis, a matter of paperwork. The idea that human spontaneity might upset the plan feels unpatriotic. Historians still argue whether this mindset created stability or sowed the seeds of future rigidity. One evening, you wander through the General Staff archives. The walls are lined with campaign studies, each bound in identical leather covers. France 1870, Austria 1866, Russia hypothetical. A clerk explains that every possible enemy has a file, updated yearly. "We prefer to stay ready," he says, without irony. Bismarck, meanwhile, is waging a different kind of campaign, one fought in parlors and parliaments instead of battlefields. His challenge now is to keep the empire united without letting the army or the parliament tear it apart. The old federal states, Bavaria, Saxony, Württemberg, still guard their local pride. The liberals demand constitutions, the conservatives demand obedience. And somewhere in the middle stands the new emperor, Wilhelm I, an old soldier trying to rule a modern machine. Bismarck understands the danger of momentum. The great questions of the day, he had said once, are decided by iron and blood. But he also knows that iron rusts and blood dries. He works tirelessly to prevent another war, fearing that too much victory might make Germany reckless. Ironically, the Iron Chancellor becomes Europe's most cautious man. Yet for all his political brilliance, even Bismarck cannot contain the cultural shift underway. Militarism is no longer just policy, it's identity. Statues of Moltke and Scharnhorst rise in public squares. Schoolchildren memorize campaigns. Industrial fairs proudly display artillery beside sewing machines. The Prussian army has become Germany's mirror, reflecting both its glory and its anxiety. Here's a small but telling anecdote. When a Berlin school inspector once complained that boys were too focused on drill exercises, the Ministry of Education replied, "Discipline learned in youth ensures obedience in adulthood." It wasn't a reprimand, it was praise. Inside the barracks, the rhythm of daily life becomes almost ritualistic. Reveille at dawn, inspection at 7, rifle practice at 10. Meals are measured by the minute, letters home inspected for morale. The soldiers sing hymns about duty, not glory. You can hear the refrain drifting through the streets. Wir dienen dem Vaterland. We serve the fatherland. Still, the efficiency isn't soulless. There's pride in it, even tenderness. Officers speak of service the way priests speak of faith. Our work, one colonel writes, is not to die for Germany, but to keep her so organized that others need not. It's bureaucratic heroism, strangely moving in its modesty. Yet, in quiet moments, unease seeps through. In cafes, intellectuals debate whether the triumph at Versailles has made Germany too confident. The philosopher Nietzsche warns that the will to order may yet devour the will to life. Few listen. After all, the trains are running on time, the economy is booming, and the empire is expanding. What could possibly go wrong? You step outside into the Berlin dusk. Gaslights flicker to life. The streets hum with energy. Horse trams rattle past, newspaper boys shouting headlines about colonial ventures and tariffs. The new empire feels unstoppable, like a machine that no longer needs its operator. And yet, in the upper windows of the War Ministry, lights still burn late into the night. Inside, young officers study new inventions, machine guns, smokeless powder, early telephones. The next generation of planners is already at work, refining the system further, tightening the gears. You can almost hear the future clicking into place. Historians still debate whether the genius of the Prussian system was its flexibility or its fatalism. Did it prepare Germany for greatness or predetermine how it would stumble? The answer, perhaps, lies in its success. A machine built to never fail eventually forgets how to doubt. As you walk away, the sound of marching boots fades into the hum of the city. The empire seems eternal. But you've been here long enough to know that no rhythm lasts forever. For now, though, Prussia's creation, the German Empire, stands immaculate, precise, and proud. Every plan has been made, every rail is polished, every soldier drilled. The question is no longer whether the machine works, it's whether it can ever stop. You wake to a Berlin morning drenched in fog. The city hums with pride, but also with the low murmur of ambition. The war is over, the empire proclaimed. But history doesn't pause for celebration. It reloads. In government offices and smoky cafes alike, one question hangs over everything. What now? France has fallen. Austria humbled. The map redrawn in Prussian ink. Yet to those who understand the logic of power, peace can be as dangerous as war. The same system that conquered Europe now threatens to devour itself if left idle. An army designed to move cannot sit still forever. At the center of it all stands Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, now the most powerful statesman in Europe. But Bismarck is no warmonger. He's a realist who knows the paradox of victory. Preventive wars, he warns, are like committing suicide from fear of death. He begins the delicate work of holding Germany together, balancing kings, ministers, and generals like chess pieces on an ever-shifting board. That's your mainstream historical fact. Bismarck's foreign policy after 1871 aims to preserve peace through diplomacy and deterrence. He forms a complex web of treaties, the League of the Three Emperors, the dual alliance with Austria-Hungary, and later the reinsurance treaty with Russia, to isolate France and keep Germany secure. But here's your quirky tidbit. Bismarck's diplomatic office reportedly kept 3 color-coded drawers, one for allies, one for enemies, and one for temporary friends. He often joked that most European countries spent time in all 3. You walk through the Reich Chancellery one late afternoon. Bismarck's desk is cluttered with letters, cigars, and dispatches. He's dictating a note to his secretary. A Europe without balance is a loaded cannon. He lights a cigar, exhales slowly, and adds, "And I prefer to keep my powder dry." Across the city, the army hums quietly. Helmuth von Moltke, now old and revered, continues to refine his doctrines. He argues that Germany must always be ready for a two-front war, that the speed and precision of the 1870 campaign must be institutionalized, not celebrated and forgotten. He's turning victory into a curriculum. In the Kriegsacademy, young officers study the Franco-Prussian War like scripture. They dissect each battle, each railway schedule, each telegram delay. Every error is cataloged, every triumph quantified. War to them is not chaos, it's geometry. And yet, beneath the perfect geometry, you sense the creeping rigidity. Initiative begins to give way to procedure. The army's brilliance becomes orthodoxy. Historians still argue whether this shift from adaptive genius to doctrinal worship was inevitable. Did the system that once liberated Prussia's mind now start to imprison it? You stroll down Unter den Linden, where merchants sell miniature iron crosses and schoolboys practice marching. Even art begins to imitate discipline. Painters favor clean lines. Architects design symmetrical facades. Poets write hymns to order. The old chaos of Europe, its messy democracies, its revolutionary dreams, feels distant here. In Berlin, structure is faith. Still, cracks appear. Industrialization races ahead, spawning both millionaires and misery. Smokestacks rise beside cathedrals, and the working class swells in restless numbers. Trade unions form, socialists speak in beer halls, and pamphlets whisper of equality. Bismarck, ever pragmatic, does something astonishing. He outflanks them. He introduces the world's first social insurance system: sickness pay, accident insurance, old age pensions. It's not born from compassion, but calculation. We must bribe the working man, he says bluntly, to see the state as his benefactor. The policy works. Germany becomes both the most militarized and the most socially advanced country in Europe. Meanwhile, the officer corps grows ever more self-assured. They see themselves as guardians of national destiny, above politics, beyond doubt. A young captain named Alfred von Schlieffen joins the general staff around this time. Quiet, methodical, almost monastic, he studies Moltke's campaigns obsessively. His notebooks are filled with diagrams of encirclements, rail networks, and mobilization timetables. You can almost feel the ghosts of future wars whispering through his pen. Inside the cafes, philosophers and scientists debate what all this order means. The chemist Fritz Haber tinkers with gases. The physicist Helmholtz speaks of energy and motion. The sociologist Max Weber warns that bureaucracy, left unchecked, can turn men into cogs. His words are prophetic, but no one's listening. The machine is working too well. Here's another strange little fact. Berlin's telegraph operators were so efficient that international companies began routing messages through Germany, simply because delays were shorter there. Prussian precision had become a global export, but every system, no matter how perfect, generates its own pressure. The army wants to expand. The liberals want more freedom. The industrial magnates want colonies. Bismarck tries to hold them all in balance. "I am like a man steering a boat with 20 oarsmen," he sighs, each rowing in a different direction. Eventually, even he can't keep pace. In 1890, Kaiser Wilhelm II, young, impulsive, and fond of uniforms, forces him into retirement. The old Iron Chancellor leaves politics in disgust, muttering, "They'll need me again, but I won't be there." And as his carriage rolls away from Berlin, you can almost hear the creak of history changing direction. Without Bismarck, restraint evaporates. The army gains influence. The Kaiser dreams aloud of colonies and glory, and the general staff begins to imagine wars not just to defend Germany, but to define it. The Prussian model, once built to protect, starts flexing its muscles for ambition. Historians still argue whether this was destiny or drift. Some say the empire was doomed by its own momentum, a machine without a brake. Others believe it could have balanced power longer, if not for the arrogance of its new leaders. Either way, you can feel the atmosphere shift. The steady hum of Prussian order becomes a drumbeat again, low, rhythmic, and growing louder. As the century closes, you stand on a Berlin bridge, watching trains thunder toward the horizon. They carry coal, mail, soldiers, and ideas. Everything that makes Germany powerful. Below, the river reflects the lights of factories and the faint glow of gas lamps. It's beautiful in its precision, chilling in its perfection. You can almost hear the heartbeat of the 19th century fading, replaced by something faster, heavier, metallic. The empire is strong, united, modern, but restless. The iron has cooled into steel. The machine hums flawlessly. And somewhere in that flawless hum, the seeds of the next upheaval are already vibrating. For now, though, the Prussian system stands supreme, an empire of railways and discipline, of scholars in uniform and soldiers with doctorates. It has turned efficiency into destiny, and destiny into doctrine. And you, standing there on that bridge, can only whisper to yourself, "The machine has learned to walk. But will it ever learn to stop?" You wake beneath the iron gaze of a statue. The sun glints off the polished helmet of Kaiser Wilhelm II, who surveys his capital as if the empire itself were an extension of his will. It's the 1890s, and the empire Bismarck built has entered its adolescence, strong, clever, and dangerously confident. Steam whistles pierce the morning air. Factories churn out rifles and locomotives with the same proud rhythm. Berlin no longer feels like the disciplined garrison town of Frederick's age. It's a metropolis of steel and glass, thrumming with electric light and ambition. Cafes overflow with officers and engineers, bankers and professors. The city smells of coal dust and coffee, ambition and ozone. The future seems to live here already. At the top stands Wilhelm II, grandson of one emperor, worshipper of another. Where his grandfather ruled with restraint, Wilhelm rules with theater. He struts through reviews in shining cuirass and white gloves, convinced that destiny has chosen him to lead Germany to greatness. "The army and I belong to each other," he boasts. It's not just a slogan, it's policy. That's your mainstream historical fact. After Bismarck's dismissal in 1890, Kaiser Wilhelm II takes direct control of foreign and military affairs, steering Germany toward aggressive imperialism and naval expansion. And your quirky tidbit: Wilhelm insisted that even his personal yacht's crew drill like a naval squadron. Once, when a sailor stumbled during parade, the Kaiser ordered a full disciplinary review at sea. You can see the results everywhere. Shipyards at Kiel and Wilhelmshaven thunder night and day, building dreadnoughts to rival Britain's Royal Navy. Engineers perfect Krupp's massive naval guns. Chemists refine explosives that burn cleaner and faster. The empire that once measured its strength in railways now measures it in tonnage. The general staff adapts accordingly. Under Moltke the Younger and later Schlieffen, the planning offices become more mathematical than ever. Maps of Europe cover entire walls, lines of red ink converging on France. The old doctrine of initiative within intent evolves into something more exact. The notion that total war can be plotted like a timetable. Schlieffen spends years calculating how to win a two-front war before it begins. He sketches sweeping arrows across Belgium and northern France, convinced that precision and speed can conquer chance itself. You wander those halls one evening. Clerks measure railway capacities in kilometers per hour. Others test mobilization scenarios with colored pins. To them, the future isn't uncertain. It's waiting for the right train schedule. Outside, German society reflects that same restlessness. Universities overflow with scientists who dream of progress as religion. Röntgen with his X-rays, Haber with his chemical miracles. The arts boom too. Wagner's bombast, Nietzsche's thunder, Jugendstil's curves. But even beauty carries discipline. Symmetry still reigns. Everywhere you look, pride gleams through polish. Workers wear medals for productivity. School children recite poems about steel. Germany has become both laboratory and barracks, its rhythm set by the clang of machines. Historians still argue whether this national energy was creative or combustible. Did industrial might make the country dynamic or simply wind the spring tighter? Maybe both. You stroll down Unter den Linden, where electric trams hum, and soldiers' boots strike sparks from the cobblestones. Crowds stop to stare at shop windows filled with models of battleships and miniature cannons. Boys point, eyes wide. "Someday, I'll serve on one," says one, chest puffed out. His mother smiles, half proud, half worried. Across the channel, Britain watches uneasily. The Kaiser's new fleet threatens to tip the naval balance that has guarded Europe for a century. The British respond with their own dreadnoughts, and an arms race begins. Steel answering steel, pride answering pride. In the meantime, colonies beckon. Africa, the Pacific, China. Germany joins the scramble late but makes up for it with zeal. The black-white-red flag flutters from Cameroon to Kiautschou. Yet the colonial ventures, costly and chaotic, only sharpen Europe's rivalries. The continent feels smaller, more crowded, and infinitely more explosive. At home, the old Prussian virtues have merged into a new kind of religion. Sunday sermons extol obedience and progress in equal measure. Pulp novels glorify engineers as much as generals. Even leisure is scheduled. Efficiency, says a Berlin satirist, is our national pastime. He isn't wrong. Still, not everyone is dazzled. Intellectuals murmur that Germany is forgetting humility, that order without empathy leads to sterility. The historian Treitschke hails power as destiny. The sociologist Zimmel worries that the modern city is devouring the soul. But the applause drowns them out. Here's another small oddity. Berlin's post office becomes the largest in the world. Trains bring letters every hour, sorted by machines that clatter like miniature factories. It's progress, yes, but also surveillance. Every message, every movement, neatly logged and timed. By 1905, Schlieffen completes his grand design, the plan for a future European war. His notebooks read like a symphony of precision. France crushed in 42 days, Russia contained, Germany triumphant. He retires, murmuring, "Keep the right wing strong." His successors treat the phrase like holy scripture. You can almost feel the empire vibrating with readiness. Military parades grow larger, uniforms sharper, speeches louder. "Our future lies on the sea," the Kaiser declares. "We are a young people, and the world is too small." The crowds cheer, the bands play, the gears tighten. Historians still debate whether Wilhelm's flamboyance masks insecurity or ambition. Perhaps both. He admires Britain but envies it, mocks France but fears its revenge. His foreign policy swings between charm and challenge, handshake and saber rattle. Each gesture adds another link to a chain he cannot see forming around him. Meanwhile, the ordinary people carry on. In factory towns, shift whistles mark time like church bells once did. Farmers read telegrams announcing grain prices set in distant cities. Even romance is punctual. Love letters delivered twice daily, neatly stamped by the same bureaucracy that mobilizes armies. You stop outside a printing shop and notice the headlines. Entente cordiale strengthens. British launch new dreadnought. Austrian Archduke tours Sarajevo. The words seem harmless, routine, yet behind them, the dominoes are quietly lining up. There's an eerie perfection to it all. The Prussian dream of order has conquered chaos so completely that no one notices the stillness before the next storm. The system is airtight, the gears polished, the telegraphs humming, but you know how stories like this end. Machines designed for motion eventually need to move. As night falls, you hear the Kaiser's voice echo from a radio transmission, still primitive, but clear. Germany's future is radiant. We are united, disciplined, and strong. His words drift through the static like a prophecy and a warning. You look out over Berlin one last time. Rail lines glinting like veins of iron, factories glowing like forges, soldiers marching past posters of battleships. The empire hums with confidence, unaware that it's rehearsing its own tragedy. For now, though, it is unstoppable. Its engines warm, its rails aligned, its people certain that order can master destiny. You exhale into the cold night and whisper, almost kindly, "You've built perfection, old Prussia. Just remember, perfection never forgives mistakes." You wake to the crackle of a telegraph line and the smell of ink. It's January 1871. Or rather, in memory, it's always January 1871. In a mirrored hall that was once the temple of French glory, trumpets sound, sabers gleam, and a gray-mustached king in a plain field uniform stands awkwardly as courtiers hail him Kaiser. The proclamation of the German Empire at Versailles was meant to be ceremony, but it feels like a collision. Around Wilhelm I stand the princes of a dozen German states, Bavaria, Saxony, Württemberg, each resplendent in their own colors, all pretending unity has come from love rather than necessity. The floor beneath their polished boots is the same that once reflected the Sun King's triumphs. When the cheers fade, the meaning sinks in. The long experiment of Prussia, discipline, education, organization, has produced not just survival, but empire. Germany is born, and Prussia has become its spine. That's your mainstream historical fact. On the 18th of January 1871, Wilhelm I was proclaimed German Emperor in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, marking the culmination of Bismarck's unification through the wars with Denmark, Austria, and France. And the quirky tidbit? Bismarck wore a simple blue officer's tunic that day, still smudged with travel dust. He refused court dress, saying, "We did not win this with embroidery. You stay in the echoing hall a little longer." The marble glows in candlelight. The air smells of wax and sweat and history. Outside, France starves under siege, and the guns still rumble faintly. It is an empire born mid-cannon blast, half glory, half grit. When the armies return home, the parades stretch for miles. Flags flutter, bands blare, and the people shout themselves hoarse. Yet among the cheers, something subtler takes root, a belief that destiny itself favors order. Every schoolroom, every drill yard, every office hums with the same quiet pride. We did this because we were disciplined. Bismarck, ever wary, sees both the promise and the peril. "We are saturated with glory," he mutters, "and that is dangerous for digestion." He understands that victory can intoxicate faster than wine, so he turns to consolidation, linking the southern states, harmonizing laws, binding the economy together with rails and tariffs. Germany becomes a clockwork colossus, The old Prussian virtues, obedience, punctuality, thrift, become national commandments. Town councils debate street lighting schedules with military precision. Factory sirens regulate life as strictly as church bells once did. Still, beneath the surface, diversity persists. Catholic Bavaria hums with beer gardens and brass bands. Protestant Prussia with bureaucracy and parades. Saxon miners sing folk songs older than the empire itself. It is unity by calculation, not by heart, and everyone feels the tension. Historians still argue whether the empire's birth was a masterpiece of statecraft or a masterpiece of accident. Did Bismarck plan every step, or merely ride a tide that no one could stop? Perhaps both. The truth, like the reflection in those Versailles mirrors, doubles back on itself. In Berlin, the new Reichstag assembles under the frescoed dome of the Whitehall. Deputies argue about budgets. Generals scowl at speeches. Bismarck sits through the noise with a kind of amused patience. They talk, he says, and I act. The Constitution gives the appearance of democracy, but the engine remains thoroughly Prussian, oiled by obedience, powered by bureaucracy. You walk through the new capital one evening. Gas lamps gleam on fresh stone boulevards. Uniforms flash everywhere. Railway guards, postal clerks, police, students in corps colors. Even street sweepers wear badges shaped like eagles. It's as if the entire nation has adopted the barracks as its metaphor. The universities flourish. So do the factories. Chemistry, engineering, and philosophy turn Germany into the laboratory of Europe. Yet the same precision that fuels progress also sharpens hierarchy. Everyone has a place, and everyone knows it. Here's a small, strange scene. A tailor in Leipzig finishes a suit for a lieutenant. When asked whether he fears war might ruin business, he shrugs. There's always war, he says, and always uniforms. It's meant as pragmatism, but it's prophecy. The countryside changes too. Railways knit farms to cities. Telegraph poles march across fields like metallic scarecrows. The pace of life quickens. Farmers who once marked seasons by harvest now time them by train schedules. Progress, says a newspaper, is our new weather. And yet, in small towns, church bells still ring. Children still chase geese through muddy lanes. The old and new Germany live side by side. Organ pipes and factory whistles harmonizing in an uneasy duet. Bismarck knows the equilibrium is fragile. He cultivates alliances abroad, pensions at home, censorship where necessary. Politics, he tells a friend, is the art of steering between reefs. For 2 decades, he succeeds. The empire prospers, the peace holds, and the myth of Prussian infallibility grows. But myths, like machines, rust when overused. The more perfect the system becomes, the less it tolerates improvisation. The army's doctrines calcify. The bureaucracy ossifies. In the salons of Vienna and Paris, people whisper that Germany is efficient but joyless. In Berlin, they take it as a compliment. The empire's symbol becomes the railway timetable, exact, unyielding, and always on time. Yet even the best timetable cannot predict a storm. The next decades will test whether the machine can weather chaos without collapsing under its own precision. For tonight, though, you stand again in that mirrored hall in your mind. The candles flicker, the trumpets fade, and the reflection of the new Kaiser trembles slightly in the glass. For all its polish, even a mirror knows how fragile perfection can be. You wake to the sound of marching bands and church bells somewhere in the heart of Berlin. The empire hums with confidence. It smells of coal smoke and new money. By the 1880s and 1890s, the German Reich is not just strong. It is the rhythm of Europe itself. Everywhere, the Prussian way of life has become the German way of life. You wander down Unter den Linden, past the statues of Frederick the Great and Scharnhorst. Their bronze eyes stare out over a world they could scarcely have imagined. Motor cars rattling past carriages, electric lamps replacing gaslight, women in smart tailored dresses hurrying to university lectures. The old kingdom of parade ground precision has grown into a modern industrial titan. And yet, beneath the hum of progress, you can feel the pulse of something older, the Prussian spirit, woven into every layer of life. That's your mainstream historical fact. During the late 19th century, Prussian values, discipline, duty, education, and obedience permeated the entire German Empire, shaping not only its military, but its schools, bureaucracy, and culture. Here's your quirky tidbit. Berlin school children were once graded not only on handwriting and mathematics, but on punctuality and posture. A slouch could lower your mark in moral conduct. In classrooms across the empire, boys and girls stand at attention when teachers enter. History lessons begin not with fairy tales, but with Frederick the Great. Every textbook presents diligence as patriotism, and the map of Europe as a chessboard to be mastered. Even handwriting drills are conducted like drills in formation, rows of identical letters marching across the page. You peek into a gymnasium where young cadets perform synchronized exercises on the Turngeräte, the gymnastic apparatus. Each movement is crisp, exact, and silent, except for the sound of boots striking the floorboards in unison. Order is freedom, says their instructor, because it makes men dependable. In the countryside, the same logic rules. Villagers rise and sleep by the factory whistle, not the rooster. Church sermons praise not only God, but duty. Sunday rest is brief. Monday, discipline eternal. The Prussian virtues, Fleiß, Treue, Gehorsam, diligence, loyalty, obedience, become social scripture. Even art bends to structure. Architecture favors clean symmetry and strong lines. Painters celebrate soldiers, engineers, and farmers, anyone who builds rather than dreams. Music, once free and romantic, finds pride in the ordered thunder of military marches. When the Preußische Armee Marsch No. 1 plays, even civilians stand taller. Historians still argue whether this culture of order uplifted the people or quietly caged them. Was the Prussian ideal a moral compass or a straitjacket? Some say it gave dignity to ordinary life. Others say it robbed life of spontaneity. Perhaps both are true. You stop by a cafe on Friedrichstrasse, where philosophers and journalists argue under clouds of cigar smoke. One insists that Germany has made obedience a national art. Another retorts, better obedience than chaos. They both laugh, uneasily. The conversation turns to education. We no longer raise children, someone jokes. We manufacture citizens. The waiter nods solemnly. His uniform is pressed sharp enough to cut bread. Still, there's warmth in this rigor. The same system that demands obedience also guarantees stability. Workers trust their wages will come. Families trust their sons will serve and return. The empire feels eternal. Trains run on time. Letters arrive promptly, and the postman salutes the schoolteacher as if they share a secret code. In a way, they do. Germany works because Germans work. It's not all sternness. Festivals are organized with mathematical precision. Even beer tents in Munich boast timetables. The order itself becomes a source of pride. The people have built a civilization so well-oiled that it seems to move on its own. Meanwhile, the army, still the heart of the state, has become a rite of passage. Every young man serves. Conscription is no longer humiliation, it's identity. Barracks life, with its strict schedule and communal meals, is seen as moral training. The army, writes one teacher, is the nation's university. In peacetime, soldiers teach literacy, geography, even hygiene. Officers lecture on duty and history. Chaplains preach that God smiles upon those who polish their boots. When they return home, veterans bring the barracks discipline with them. They run businesses, schools, and city councils with the same methodical zeal. And so the army seeps into everything. Bureaucrats salute each other in corridors. Railway clerks memorize timetables like battle orders. A postal worker once described his job as campaigning against disorder. Women too find their place in this order. They run households with military precision, ledgers balanced, children washed, meals timed to the minute. The home, says a popular women's magazine, is the mother's regiment. Even affection is structured. Love letters are folded with geometric care, sealed with wax, and sent through a postal system that could rival a general staff. Of course, not everyone thrives under this rigidity. Artists complain that the Prussian soul has become too clean to be creative. Socialists mutter that a system built on discipline forgets compassion. But for the majority, the trade feels worth it. Life is predictable. Food is on the table. The state, like a stern father, provides. There's even humor in the uniformity. Berliners, famous for their dry wit, make endless jokes about punctuality. A Prussian is never late, goes one saying. Only his clock is wrong. Another, we have free speech, as long as we speak at the right time. Still, you can sense an undercurrent of unease. Too much perfection invites temptation. The empire's vast machinery hums flawlessly, but its people begin to wonder what else that machinery could do. Could it be turned outward again? Could the same organization that built schools and factories also conquer new worlds? By the turn of the century, the answer is beginning to form. The barracks that once forged unity are now forging ambition. The school that taught order now teaches destiny. The army that guarded peace now dreams of proving itself once more. Historians still debate whether this transformation was deliberate or accidental. Did Germany choose to militarize its soul? Or did the soul simply grow around the sword it carried for so long? Either way, the identity is complete. To be German is to be efficient, organized, and unyielding. You watch a column of school children march past the Brandenburg Gate. Their teacher carries a small flag. Their shoes shine. Their steps are identical. A few stumble and the teacher corrects them gently but firmly. Once more, he says, smiling, together. The children obey and the line straightens. Their rhythm is flawless. The crowd applauds. No one questions it. And that is how Prussia's way of life, its balance of intellect, labor, and obedience, spreads quietly from barracks to school, from factory to family, until it becomes less a system than a state of mind. The empire hums on, proud and tireless, unaware that history's next test is already marching toward it, just beyond the horizon. You wake to the smell of summer rain and the deep, distant thud of marching boots echoing through the streets of Berlin. The year is 1914, or perhaps it is every year that Prussia's dream and destiny finally meet. Flags hang from balconies, crowds cheer themselves hoarse, and railway stations pulse with motion. Soldiers lean from train windows waving caps. Mothers weep and wave back, faces proud and trembling. The old machine has awakened once again. For over a century, Prussia's soul has been discipline, its heartbeat, precision, its religion, duty. And now, as Europe sleepwalks into catastrophe, that creed marches at the head of 1 million men. The spark, as every school child now learns, comes from far away. A gunshot in Sarajevo, an archduke dead, treaties like dominoes falling one by one. For most of Europe, the news is shocking. For Germany, it feels almost expected. The plans have existed for years. The Schlieffen Plan, the crown jewel of Prussian logic, unfolds like clockwork. Mobilization timetables click into motion, every train scheduled to the minute. There is no panic, no improvisation, only the hum of perfection. That's your mainstream historical fact. In August 1914, Germany executed the Schlieffen Plan, invading Belgium to outflank France in what it expected to be a short, decisive war. And your quirky tidbit? One general reportedly carried a timetable listing train arrivals down to the half minute and panicked when one train was delayed by 6. Even war was expected to run on time. You stand on a railway platform as the soldiers sing Deutschland über alles. Their faces are young, flushed, certain. They carry field caps, not helmets, for they believe they'll be home by Christmas. Banners read, Jeder Schuss ein Russ, jeder Stoß ein Franz. Every shot a Russian, every thrust a Frenchman. It sounds proud. It also sounds rehearsed. The trains pull away. The whistles echo like trumpets fading into the future. And with them departs the last illusion of control. At first, the machine performs beautifully. The army moves with breathtaking precision, outflanking fortresses, crushing resistance, reaching the Marne in weeks. Officers send home telegrams comparing battlefields to map exercises. All proceeds according to plan, one writes, even as corpses line the roads. But then, the plan meets reality. French resistance stiffens, British reinforcements arrive, and the miracle of organization slams into the chaos of mud and blood. The trains still run, the orders still flow, but the front refuses to move. The generals double their calculations, redraft the geometry, yet the lines hold. For the first time in a century, the Prussian logic of war falters. Historians still argue whether it failed from arrogance or inevitability. Could any system, no matter how perfect, truly account for millions of human wills? You wander through a staff tent somewhere in Belgium. Officers stare at maps covered in colored pins. A telegraph clicks. Outside, thunder rolls, not weather, but artillery. A young aide murmurs, "The timetable no longer fits the trains." His superior replies, "Then we will make the trains fit the timetable." That, in one sentence, is Prussia's tragedy. The months drag into years. The discipline that once inspired Europe now traps it. Men march into storms of steel because the schedule says they must. The telegraph wires that once carried triumph now transmit casualty lists. Teachers who once praised obedience now read death notices for their students. The machine still hums, but the music has changed to a dirge. In the trenches, soldiers cling to old virtues. Clean rifles, sharp salutes, calm under fire. But even they sense the irony. "We are punctual," one writes in his diary, "even for our own funerals." Back home, the rhythm falters. Food lines stretch through the streets. Ration cards replace wages. The empire that once seemed eternal begins to creak. Yet still, the people obey. Obedience is survival. And when the end finally comes, 1918, gray and cold, it comes not with defeat on the battlefield, but collapse from within. The railways are jammed, the telegraphs silent, the soldiers marching home without orders. The Prussian system, so flawless in victory, cannot compute surrender. The Kaiser flees to Holland. The generals resign. The empire that was born in Versailles dies in confusion. Still, even in ruin, its influence lingers. The schools remain disciplined, the bureaucracy intact, the people trained in patience and endurance. The world looks at Germany, shattered, hungry, humiliated, and still sees a trace of Prussian posture. Back straight, eyes forward, boots polished. Historians still debate what the legacy truly was. Did Prussia's fusion of state, army, and society create a model of strength or a blueprint for tragedy? Was its obsession with order a shield against chaos or the seed of future authoritarianism? There are no easy answers. You wander now through the ruins of an old barracks near Potsdam. The parade ground is empty. Weeds grow between the cobblestones, but if you close your eyes, you can still hear the echo of drums, the bark of commands, the rhythm of boots that once shook Europe. The ghosts here do not haunt, they march. And yet, the story doesn't end in ashes. The ideas that once served empire, education, merit, discipline, will in time serve other purposes. German universities will rebuild. German engineers will design wonders again. Even the word Ordnung, order, will lose its sting and become the quiet backbone of recovery. The world learned from Prussia both what to emulate and what to fear. Modern armies, civil services, even schools still carry its imprint. Every time a train leaves on time, a student salutes a teacher, or a file is stamped approved, there's a faint echo of that kingdom by the Spree River, a reminder that excellence and obedience, once twinned too tightly, must be kept in balance. You look once more over the gray river and whisper a farewell. Sleep now, Prussia. You built yourself with reason and steel, and you fell to both. You taught the world that order can conquer chaos, but not forever. The rain falls softly over the silent parade ground. Somewhere, a single telegraph wire hums in the wind, as if still waiting for orders that will never come. The night has grown quiet now. The battles, the parades, the speeches, all fade into the hush of memory. You can almost hear the soft ticking of that Prussian clock again, its gears slowing, its hands drifting toward rest. The kingdom that once drilled the world in precision has become a ghost story told beneath the lamplight of modernity. Breathe slowly. Imagine the fields of Brandenburg after the harvest, the mist hanging low, the earth dark and rich. No banners, no bugles, just the sound of wind through pine trees and the distant creak of a farmhouse door. This too was Prussia, the ordinary heart beating beneath the iron. The soldiers have gone home. The trains no longer run on war's timetable. Somewhere, a teacher closes his ledger. A mother folds a uniform and tucks it into a drawer. The great machine has stilled, leaving behind not silence, but a kind of peace, a space to rebuild, to think, to forgive. Let that image stay with you. Order without tyranny, discipline without fear. The lesson of Prussia isn't just in its rise or its fall, but in its humanity, the striving, the structure, the stubborn hope that through effort alone we might master chaos. So, rest easy tonight. History will keep marching without you for a while. The telegraphs are quiet, the lights dimmed, and the long echo of boots has faded into rain. Sweet dreams, traveler.